Let's go ahead and call the meeting of the Lebanon Planning Commission to order and be standing for a flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you do the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Engelford is excused. Commissioner Malloy, Commissioner Fountain, Commissioner Baxter,
Here.
Commissioner Brashears,
Here.
Commissioner McLean,
Here.
Vice Chair Gary Kunarowski,
Here.
and Chair Robertson.
Okay, we have no minutes to review tonight, so we'll go right on to our next agenda item. Next is if we have anybody in our audience that wishes to address the planning commission on an item that is not on the agenda tonight, we ask you to come forward, address the planning commission. No movement, then we will move on to public hearing, planning file A-23-09. Ask the commissioners if there's any conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias. Seeing none, we'll turn over staff for staff report.
I get to talk.
City Attorney first.
That's all right. So
Oh, that's right.
as stated, we will, of course, ask for ex parte contact. This hearing is pursuant to ORS 197-763. We will start out with the staff report. After the staff report, I'll allow questions of staff by the commission, allow public testimony from audience members, either in favor or against, and any rebuttal if necessary. Recognize that all testimony and evidence must be directed towards the criteria that is described in the staff report or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulations. Failure to raise an issue, including a constitutional issue or other issues related to the proposed conditions, if any, accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford this commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues, will preclude any appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Please state your name when you testify. We'll go through the procedures where the applicant goes first and because they have the burden of proof. And with that, I would normally ask if there was any ex parte contact or conflict of interest, but there isn't. So, all right.
All right, thank you. Now we'll turn it over to staff for a staff report.
Yes, sir. Before you tonight is planning file number A-23-01. It is for a proposed annexation of a property that is on Stoltz Hill Road, north of Vaughn Lane. The comprehensive plan designation for this property is residential mixed density. The applicant has indicated an acceptance of the initial zoning associated with that comprehensive plan designation. So upon annexation, the zoning of the property would be residential mixed density. The property is contiguous to city boundaries on the western and southern property line. And being contiguous, it is eligible for annexation. There are city utilities within the general vicinity that upon any proposed development, the property could have utilities extended to the site to provide service. And so it is a serviceable area, and it is generally within a developed area with a large subdivision to the eastern side and general residential dwellings surrounding the property on all sides. And so it's a pretty straightforward proposed annexation, again, being contiguous and having public facilities available to be servicing the site. It meets the criteria for annexation. Within the staff report that was attached as part of the agenda packet, it goes through each of the decision criteria with the details associated with why it would meet those. But generally speaking, it meets the criteria for annexation. So the recommendation would to be approve it. And that would conclude my reports, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Kelly?
Yeah, so the property recently went through a property line adjustment through the county. And so it shows our maps haven't been updated to it because it is finalizing its process. The general shape of what's on the screen And the map that's provided for the annexation map are the correct boundaries that, once it's finalized, would be the site boundary area.
Okay, good catch. Any other questions? Okay, then we will open the public. Applicant's representative to come forward, sign in, state your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Laura LaRock with Udall Engineering and Land Surveying. I am here representing the applicant for L Ventures. As Kelly mentioned, it's contiguous with city limits on the south and east portion of the site, able to have service and access. And we are accepting the zone designation as described in the comprehensive plan. So primarily, my purpose being here this evening is just to answer any questions that you might have on the application.
Any questions for Laura? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition of the application?
That's me.
Okay,
Name's Jeff Meek, live over on Larson Road. Humbly appreciate your guys' time. I'll try to make this short and sweet. Talked to a lot of people in the neighborhood out there. We've been seeing a serious increase of crime as well as dumping in the areas. I'm not here to stop progress. I'm not here to whine. Everything everywhere is going through changes right now, and we're growing pretty fast. Nothing wrong with that. We got a lot of new faces in town. Our schools, are they able to handle this amount of people coming in? I mean, they're bursting at the seams. At the same time, do we have a city jail that's functioning at the moment? I mean, these are, just things like that I'm concerned about. Can we handle this new growth? Our roads in the morning and evenings are getting seriously overcrowded. I mean, I'm for homes coming in by all means, but more apartments, forgive me if I'm wrong, but if there's more apartments, I don't know if Lebanon can really handle it that side of town. We're a lot of country folk out there. We like to shoot our guns. We like to have our dogs bark.
if I may interject for just a minute, there
Yes,
might
sir.
be a little bit of misunderstanding. The application tonight is simply an annexation. There's no development proposal with it at all. So it's possible that it may be annexed into the city and nothing happens for years to come. We don't have any development proposal. And I think that's where your testimony is headed, is if it is developed with additional traffic, different, additional people, is that your concern?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if there is a development proposal, there will be a separate hearing for that. And that would be the appropriate time for that. So if you're good with that,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Thank you for your time.
Mr.
Yep,
Meeks,
thank you.
Yes, sir.
thank you for coming and testifying and talking about these things. I completely agree with you that crime and,
Oh, I should.
what's going on is probably not acceptable to anybody in the long term. But I just want to thank you for coming in.
You bet. Sorry
So
if I
before you leave,
misunderstood.
I want to make sure we're on the same page. Are you talking about the annexation on Stoltz Hill Road? Or are you talking about the apartment building on the north side of Airport?
It's the new property on Stoltz Hill, correct? Right behind Eastland Christian Academy over there?
He's talking about the annexation.
Okay, all right. So yeah, we're good then. If there is a development proposal, there'll be a notice of that come out at some point in the future.
Provide some clarification. And just to clarify, somebody that wants to annex into a property does not immediately equate to development. A perfect example is if somebody has a home on a property and their septic system fails, if they're eligible for annexation, they can annex into the city and connect to city services. this property, and so that's an example where just because something's annexed does not equate to immediate development of something. Annexation, when it's a vacant property, much like this one is, can generally note that development might be coming, but when a city gets an annexation request, we don't get a decision of whether or not development is occurring as part of that annexation or not. A property has a right to annex if it is contiguous and it can be served by city utilities. And so we don't stand in the way of that, generally speaking, if it can meet the criteria. When a development proposal is provided, much like you received a notice for the annexation, you will receive a notice if any development proposal is provided to the city and is being considered before the Planning Commission. And you'll see what the development would look like. You'll be able to contact staff and ask staff any questions ahead of time. And you'll have the same opportunity before the Planning Commission to ask any questions if it's a development that would come before this commission.
Forgive me if I'm telling anybody their business. I know it's whoever's property it is. It's none of my business, but it's just the general area we're concerned about.
Absolutely.
All our roads and everywhere in there. So terribly sorry about misunderstanding, folks.
No
Not one bit
problem.
at all.
No problem. That's what
Just,
we're here for.
just talked with everybody on the street and we noticed a lot of building going on out there and we're just very, very concerned about the south side of town, big time. A lot of folks out there.
Understood.
Well, thank you, Mr. Meeks. We need to hear from the public. We need to hear.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, then we will close the public testimony portion of our hearing, and all further discussion will be amongst planning commissioners and staff. Any concerns with this proposal? It's really pretty straightforward, as Kelly said in her staff report. Does everybody feel that the criteria has been met in the application? Okay. Then is anybody prepared to make a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Moving on to our second public hearing, planning file AR-23-02, 24-unit apartment complex. Any ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias? Seeing none, do we need to add anything?
Just the little one thing that's constituted, that's required by Oregon law. Please recognize all testimony evidence must be directed towards the criteria described in the staff report or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulations. Note that failure to raise an issue, including a constitutional issue or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval, if any, accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues, will preclude any appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals.
Okay,
I'd be able to do that with one breath, but I couldn't.
all right, we'll turn it over to staff for staff report.
Thank you, sir. Again, before you tonight is a proposed administrative review application to AR 23-02. This is for a property that is generally located on the northeast corner of Stoltz Hill Road and Airport Road. I said generally located because there is a small tract of land. It's an undeveloped piece of land that sits right at the corner. That is not part of the consideration of this development. The property is zoned residential mixed density. It is approximately 1.02 acres in size. And so being 1.02 acres in size, it is eligible for development of pretty much any type of residential development that's authorized within the zone. For surrounding properties, basically to the northeast and west, our property is within the residential mixed density zone and are improved with single family homes and townhomes. And to the south, our properties within the residential mixed density zone and are improved with a single family home and a mini mart. There are public facilities within the general vicinity of the site along the new road extension of Stoltz Hill Road that you can't really see because we haven't had a map increase, but the Stoltz Hill Road is along here. Sorry about that. Stoltz Hill Road extends along here, and utilities are located within the new extension of Stoltz Hill Road and Airport Road. And it is proposed that utilities would be serviced from the Stoltz Hill Road area. For the development proposal itself, you can see the road now. Again, you have the excess tract of land in this area here that is not part of the development proposal and not owned by the property owner. So that is not under consideration for development or use. Again, the site area is 1.02 acres in size. In terms of the development proposal, it is for a 24-unit apartment complex. Based off of the density requirements for the residential mixed density zone, when you're developing apartment complex, we require a certain site area based off of the unit size and count. In the staff report, we provide a table breakdown of what's being proposed, but generally speaking, to develop 24 units at the size that they're proposing, you would need 0.85 acres to be able to accommodate it, and the site is larger than that, so the density requirements have been met. For setback requirements, the minimums require a 10-foot front setback. Since it is generally on the corner and it has 2 street frontages, you also have a street side setback as well. And that could be 15 feet. You do a street side or front setback. One must be 10, one must be 15. You have an interior side setback requirement of 5 feet and a 20-foot setback requirement for the rear. Along Airport Road, you have a minimum 15-foot setback provided along the frontage for the parking area and a larger 25-foot setback on the building setback. And then along Stoltz Hill Road, you're providing a 10-foot setback from building to the property line for the excess tract, and then a bit farther when you actually get to the road frontage itself. You have a minimum of 5 foot. Oh boy, what did I do? Hang on. There we go. You have a minimum 5 foot setback provided on the interior side where the parking area is located, and that's improved with a 5 foot landscape buffer between the parking and the property line. And then you have a minimum 20-foot setback between the building and then the access area to the north. In terms of lot coverage, the maximum lot coverage is 60%. What is being proposed is 11.5%, meeting that requirement. For parking, our parking requirement is 2.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit. However, our code does authorize an automatic earned reduction of if you provide more bike parking facilities on site, you can do up to a maximum of a 15% vehicle parking reduction if you provide those facilities. That 15% reduction is being proposed as part of this development. And to do so, they are providing up to 44 bicycle spaces, I'm going to say parking spaces. And a large number of those spaces, 22 of them, would be within an enclosed area located on the corner of the property here and underneath the stairwells. So they are covered parking bicycle parking spaces. And so with the earned 15% reduction, minimum 46 vehicle parking spaces are required and 44 bike parking spaces are required, and both have been accommodated on the sites. In terms of access, the site is only proposed to be accessed off of Stoltz Hill Road at the very northern portion of the property. At the last Planning Commission meeting, a modification to a subdivision was approved for the properties to the north of this proposed development. And they're proposing a shared drive access for the apartment complex and then the 2 flag lots to the north. And the driveway access and width meets the minimum requirement for the access for the number of units that are proposed to be sharing that site. There is no proposed access off of Airport Road, so it would all be funneled on Stoltz Hill Road to the intersection. And for the record and for understanding, a lighted signal is still going to happen there. It is still being worked through. and it will be improved eventually. And so at that point, it will be a fully signalized intersection to further ensure that traffic is flowing appropriately. A traffic impact analysis was completed as part of this development proposal, and under consideration was whether or not a designated turn lane would be required for improvement on Stoltz Hill Road. It penciled out that it was not required as long as it was a signalized intersection. And so the TIA did not identify any off-site mitigation that I remember. Perfect. And so in terms of access with that signalized intersection, everything meets the requirements. Next up is open space. The staff report provides a detailed analysis of all of the different open space calculations that are required. But to suffice it to say, the open space that is provided within this center area that sort of jets out into the parking area that would be fenced off. This provides a sufficient minimum requirement for the consolidated common open space area. And then a large portion of the site is large enough to be categorized under the usable open space because it meets the minimum width requirements of at least 20 feet. So a large portion of these walkway areas and then the upper area here above the building also counts as open space calculation, meeting the requirements. And then finally for fencing, because you have existing residential and proposed residential development to the north and the west, we do have a condition that a site obscuring fence is provided along the western boundary line that's not within the front setback area. And it would be a site obscuring fence with improved landscaping to ensure that there's no light intrusion from the parking lot into the neighboring residential. And then we would also have a requirement that there is fencing along the northern property line where there's no required site access. So basically separating the flag lot here with a fence as well. We have had communications with the property owner that owns the tract of land here that has identified a request to have a 6-foot site obscuring fence be placed along that tract of land. At this point, staff did not include that as part of the conditions simply because it's an undevelopable tract of land that backs up to a public street. And so it doesn't necessarily meet something that staff would automatically recommend as a fencing requirement, but I do want to mention that that has been requested by the property owner and would be at the discretion of the planning commission whether or not they want to include that. So lots of details on that one. If there's any questions, I'm available, but other than that, I can conclude my report.
Any questions for Kelly?
Yeah, Kelly, what do you mean by unbuildable on that little strip of land between Stoltz Hill and the apartment place there?
So this strip of land here,
Right.
it does not meet any of the lot size requirements to be able to establish a permissible use within the zone that it is.
So what kind of possible developments could it be used for?
Nothing. The HOA associated with the subdivision.
And another question here, on the northwest corner of that property, did you say, you said, I think I read it in here, something about an access driveway, a shared driveway?
Yeah, so the drive access starts here on Stoltz Hill Road. And then there's a shared driveway that goes, you turn here into the parking area, and then it goes into private drive access for the 2 flag lots here.
So that's an ingress and egress there on Stoltz Hill?
Yes.
And then the little blurb there for the private drive back into those flag lots?
Yep.
That is accessible by who?
It's accessible by the apartment complex and the 2 flag lots.
So they would be able to drive out that way, then go through the other apartments and come back out on Stoltz Hill?
No, so the only access point is the parking lot here. And then you would drive in this hatched area is where the access easement is located. And so you would drive through that access easement to Stoltz Hill here.
Oh, okay.
There's no further access to the north that would then put you out at the top of the cul-de-sac or anything like that.
That clarifies what I thought I saw.
So the 3 flag lots, are they all the same ownership?
Currently.
Okay, will there be some type of a reciprocal access agreement?
Yes.
Now, these driveways that are coming out to Airport Road there, that seems awfully close to that intersection. There's going to be a light there, right, Ron?
There are no there's no driveways that come out onto airport.
Those are just walkways that take you out to this sidewalk. The parking lot is in this area here. And so the only drive access in and out of the site is off of Stoltz Hill, circling around the parking lot and then back to Stoltz Hill.
Another question they had, they're dropping 8 parking spots and adding 44 bicycle parking areas. Now, that seems an excessive amount of bicycle parking for 24 apartments. I just don't see half the people in this apartment complex just using bicycles as their transportation. Lebanon's kind of a pickup and car town. I just don't see the reasoning behind eliminating 8 parking spots and adding 44 bicycle spots, except for maybe this developer's trying to save a few $1,000s by not having to put in parking spaces.
So it is in our code as written, an earned parking reduction that doesn't equate to a variance or an additional planning commission consideration. It's if you provide those additional bike facilities, then you get that, then you're eligible for that reduction. And so does 44 bicycle parking facilities make sense for 24 units? I would leave that up to the planning commission to consider in terms of any future code considerations that would be changed, but it is an automatic opportunity that is provided to the development.
Right.
And so if the planning commission wants to consider future code changes, we can talk about that at a future date, but it is part of the code and it's a tool that they're eligible to apply.
It just seems like, it's a way for a developer to skirt around as many parking spots. Let's add a few bicycle spots over here. We'll save a few $1,000s on parking spaces. It just seems more of a cost-saving thing for the developer than a convenience thing for the residents of this place.
I
That's
understand that
my opinion.
Yeah.
Will
On
be.
one side, yeah.
Yeah, here's one of the issues that I have with that kind of I'm gonna call it a tactic to save money. One of the issues that I have with that is that if you start limiting parking spaces in these apartment complexes, these people are gonna be parking everywhere else, out on the street and other people's properties and things like that. It's just, I think it's a concern that if we start limiting parking spaces in a car and pickup town, where, we are a bedroom community, people do commute. I don't see too many people riding bicycles to Albany or Corvallis. So maybe that's something we should bring up to the council.
Dave, is your concern that the parking is inadequate?
Right.
Okay.
Gonna say it's pretty near.
It
It says 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty close.
It's,
And the size of the apartments is studio, 1 bedroom, or 2 bedroom?
yeah,
Correct.
most of them are studios or 1 bedroom. And then there's 6 2 bedrooms. So I would assume that for a studio bedroom, you're likely not having all of those studio bedrooms using 2
Right.
parking spaces. But again, for the purposes of the conversation, the parking as it sits with the proposal as it's provided does meet the city's code as it's written today. And so that's why I do say, if you want to have a conversation about code considerations in the future, we can work with the chair if he wants to put that as a planning commission item. of consideration, but the project as the code is written meets code.
Yeah, because, here's where I think the trend is going, is with rent prices going up like they are, you're not going to have a lot of one person, one apartment dwellings. You're going to have a one bedroom, you're going to have couple people living in it. You're going to have a 2 bedroom, you're going to have 4 people living in it. And so that equates to more vehicles, more cars, more traffic. And if there isn't some kind of an accommodation for these people, they're going to be parking on the streets and places they're not supposed to, and in their yard or whatever. So it's just a concern that I have.
Okay.
That's the trend we're going.
Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Oh, which one? Again, the fence, I have a question about the fence. So it's the northwest side or the west side?
The west side and the north where there's not drive access. So the north along basically this property line, if you can see my
And that's
cursor,
site obscuring?
that would be site obscuring. And then the western property line until it, oh, what did I do? And then the western property line,
Houses on that side?
yes.
So the other side of the property is just a fence?
The other side of the property, the city proposal under the conditions as staff has written them does not establish a requirement for any fence. Because again, it's a street and attractive land. And we didn't put any requirement for a fence along the frontage of Airport Road either, because it again opens up to a roadway. And so we really, in historical applications of consideration of staff's proposed conditions of approval, where a new development backs up to a residential development is where we automatically propose requirements for fences. Any commission's determination whether or not you want to require additional fencing beyond that, or you can leave it up to the developer to provide or not provide fencing.
I'm just thinking it's the backside of the apartments. And they are developing those townhouses on that road.
Mhm.
There's what, 4 on the top corner, the open, middle is open, and then there's 4 more before Applegate.
Is there a site obscuring on the south side of the property against airport?
That's
No,
not what
no.
staff has written currently as conditions, and there's no fencing that has been clearly identified on the plan.
On the plat, it looks like there's some shrubbery there, but it doesn't go clear across. Okay. Are you good, Tina?
Yeah, I was just curious about the fencing.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
A couple meetings ago, I think there was some talk about the HOA in that area, that development. And so any development has to be approved by the HOA in that development area, correct?
This property is not within the HOA boundaries. The HOA boundaries are associated with the subdivision to the east side of Stoltz Hill, and then the area that was just replatted at the last meeting to the north of this property. But this property itself is not included in the scope of the
But the
HOA.
HOA maintains that little,
The HOA does have that tract of land that it's adjacent to that it also maintains, but not this property.
Okay, any further questions? If not, then we will open the public testimony portion and request that the applicant's representative come forward. Again, sign in, state your name. And Laura, could you pull the mic close to you so Trey can hear what you're saying?
I can try. I think the actual cord is too short. But this one works. Okay. So Laura LaRock with Udall Engineering Land Surveying. I am the applicant's representative for this particular proposal. So as Kelly mentioned, this is an existing parcel that's developed with a single family home. The proposal is to demo that existing single family home and construct the 24-unit apartment complex. So based on the discussion, I feel that there's maybe 2 points that I can further elaborate on, and that's parking, landscapes, and aesthetics. So the parking one, I would just touch base on the code. There is an earned allowance that allows you to take advantage of providing more bicycle parking to offset the amount of parking. I believe what was not mentioned in the discussion that took place prior to this is that the required parking for a site is 2.25 spaces per unit, regardless of the size. I would say that most jurisdictions apply this standard differently. What I've seen at the most is 1.75 with some sort of metrics for requiring a visitor parking every 4 units or something to that effect. So when you're talking and taking consideration about allowing more bicycle parking in lieu of vehicle parking, maybe the actual discussion should be what is the right amount of parking by unit type. So as Kelly mentioned, most of these units and what's demanded by the market is studio 1 bedrooms, probably just due to their affordability. So it could be something that the Planning Commission or City Council takes a closer look at through a parking study, just to see if what's required by the code currently is maybe perhaps too much and not serving the market. Because if you're developing more parking, more infrastructure improvement, then that's less actual space that you get to enhance with landscaping, development, amenities, things of that nature. So it really is an offset. Some other jurisdictions do allow some flexibility where maybe you'd have some more ability to move around amenities on site. On this particular one, the Lebanon Development Code requires the children's play area to be central in the development. So when you're taking a look at an infill site like this and you say central, and you apply setbacks and access and things of that nature, it really restricts where you can actually develop parking. On this particular proposal, we looked at putting the children's play area to the north of the building. However, all intents and purposes, that would not have met the development code because it would not have been central to the site. However, it would have allowed the developer to provide additional parking on site. So when you take a look at parking issues, I think it's important to look at, is what the code requiring actually meeting the needs based on the unit type, providing maybe some more abilities to do flexible development and adjustments to other development code standards. If parking is what important, would really help developers do some different designs to site plans. On this particular one, because of the unit mix, are requiring what we feel is adequate to the site. Most developers that we work with, even when parking is not required, because the state legislator has actually removed that recently from large cities, there's no longer a minimum that's required. Typically, they do provide at least 2 spaces per unit, and we are very close to meeting that metric here. The other question that came up was screening and aesthetics to the property. On this particular one, the applicant agrees with city staff to apply that site obscuring fencing along the north and west property line where there's going to be abutting single family or duplex dwellings. Along the east side, it makes less sense in this particular development. I think it'd actually be more aesthetically pleasing if you can just apply the front setback and side yard landscaping standards to this site. And then I would point out, even if there is a requirement for a site obscuring fence, this is a 3-story building. So what you're trying to screen and fence off in this particular and how it's oriented on the site really wouldn't be achieved by fencing. And then the last piece of this is that the portion of the site is bordered by an undeveloped track, and then a portion right by the access way is considered a front yard. So even if a fencing standard was applied in that area, it would have to be set back considerably to get to that 6-foot height. So even if fencing was put along that track, it'd essentially be 4 foot tall. And I really feel personally that the landscaping will look better and more appropriate in that space. So otherwise, I didn't hear any other kind of questions or concerns, but I did want to be available today to answer questions, or if you thought of anything since the staff report, I'm happy to answer those.
Would you have, or would the developer have any objection to extending the shrubbery on the south side to the far distance? I'm concerned about the traffic pattern in the parking lot shining onto Airport Road and across the street.
Yeah, so this isn't a final landscaping plan. There is going to be city street side landscaping. I think there's 2 different standards that apply, or maybe 3, but there is a mix between maybe a 4-foot fence and landscaping. So you could look to Kelly to ask the question, but there's either a low screen or a higher screen standard. The applicant would be fine with either one of those being applied.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of the application? Do we have anybody wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Seeing none, then we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. All further discussion will be amongst planning commissioners and staff. I guess one question maybe for Ron. Kelly mentioned that the traffic signal is going to happen at some point. I don't know what the timeline is on this project, but would it be an issue, 300 daily trips is identified in this, to send another 300 trips to that intersection prior to the traffic signal?
It would be, I'd have to confirm that with Kittleson, but for the most part, yeah, sorry.
Destruction of government property, right?
Probably cracked my neck. Yes, we would definitely want the signal in place before this happens. We're on track to put the signal out to bid in probably August, September of this year. So it would be relatively in the same time frame before that happened. If something were to happen, I think we would look at, I'd have to go back to talk to Kittleson on the traffic impact analysis to see what their take on that would be. But I don't know that we'd want to put 300 more trips out there without that signal. This is kind of in conjunction with a signal. And so.
So should we put a condition in here that delays the final until that traffic signal is completed?
You could, other than the fact that I would want their input on this, the traffic engineer, before we did that.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So you could definitely put that condition in there. I can't really give you that recommendation until I've seen what the traffic engineer says about something like that. I mean, I can guess, but I don't really want to guess at this and put that condition in there. I wouldn't recommend that condition at this point.
Okay.
That's,
If that was a point of concern, we could probably draft language to something of the effect of if the traffic engineer identifies that the signal is required prior to occupancy, certificate occupancy will be displayed until signal is operational.
yeah, and that would be acceptable.
Okay.
I just don't have a good feel, Dawn, just to be honest with you.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that this developer go forward with his project and for whatever reason, that doesn't happen. And then there he sits.
It's entirely possible. Yes, agreed.
I share your concerns, Dawn.
The city attorney might have concerns of what was just proposed.
So I guess was that issue wasn't addressed in the traffic study? Was there just an assumption made that the signal was going to be there?
Yes. So the signal is slated to be there, right?
Right.
So the assumption, what we had them look at was not whether a signal is warranted. We already know that there's a signal warranted there. What we had them look at is a individual left-hand turn lane warranted on that leg of Stoltz Hill Road. The answer to that question was no. What we didn't look at was what happens if the signal's not there, right?
And when we're looking at the conditions or what we're looking at as far as the commission in order to approve this on the traffic study, is there anything that raises an issue that would allow the commission to impose a condition as a result of the traffic study?
Well, that's why I mean, we can guess at this, but I would want their input on this before we wrote it into the language, right, as a condition. I think the planning commission could say that you were, to write this up this way, or at least let the traffic consultant look at it, right? So the traffic consultant's gonna look at it and say, yes, no. I mean, we already know that the intersection warrants a signal, right? So all we're doing is adding to that, right? So I see where they're coming from for that, but that's not something we looked at.
Just trying to figure out how to how to proceed, because I think that's a reasonable consideration. Was there any discussion with the developer about this? As
No,
far as-
I mean, we're moving forward on the traffic signal, but, we're 2 years behind right now for various reasons. So, I mean, there is that. There's a piece of property there that's going through the eminent domain process right now. So depending on where that lands, I mean, yeah.
If there's not the comfort level of drafting the language in the way that was proposed, the alternative would be to postpone final decision to allow staff to have that communication with the traffic engineer and come back next month.
Well, that's what I was saying is that's probably the appropriate avenue would be to not make a final decision tonight.
And yeah, and we're fine. We just didn't look at that because, I mean, we're moving forward with it. Right? So when you look back at what the original traffic signal warrant was, it was for traffic counts based in the year of 2022. That's when the threshold was going to be met. I would feel more comfortable if we had them look at this intersection and how it's going to function without a signal so that we knew that, if that's your concern.
Yeah, my concern is another 300 trips
Yeah.
to an intersection that already deemed needs to be signalized.
If everything moves as planned, we would have the signal up and operational before they're done. But
So it's just a matter of time before the signal is done. It's going to get done. It's just a matter of how long it would have to be functional.
Yeah.
If it's not done by the time.
And it's
that-
possible if we postpone this and have discussions with the developer could very well, and I have no idea, and the representative may not even know tonight, but there may be language that they would be more than agreeable to. They may not, they may be timing this along with the signal. So it probably makes sense to delay a final decision and provide input, allow input.
Well, when I was reading in this traffic study, it was also done during the time of the Applegate landing it was only partially complete and only had one section of it occupied. Now it's all occupied.
yeah, so the warrants were based on that entire development. It wasn't based on just a partial. So when the signal was warranted, you have to look at this development that's before you today. That wasn't even a conceptual idea at that point. So the warrants were met just based on Applegate.
So it appears that the developer's representative may have some input to this. If there's no objection from the planning commission, I will reopen the public testimony. Okay?
Okay,
Right,
thank you.
Laura?
Yeah, so this is not something that we discussed beforehand, and I don't have the team to defer to tonight. What I would like to request is actually closing the hearing and then just modifying the draft conditions, bringing back draft conditions before the planning commission for approval at that point. Or the alternative is that the track and the actual timing that goes into creating construction plans and getting this site actually ready for a certificate of occupancy will likely occur after that signal. I think both of those projects are on the same development track. So we also wouldn't have any issue with, as Kelly proposed, to say if a discussion and it's found it's warranted to delay the final certificate of occupancy of the buildings. I'm just not sure if any more public testimony would be required and need to actually have the record remain open to have that conversation if this discussion's already took place.
Well, I think it would be the commission could or couldn't. You can close the public testimony portion if you'd like, which I think is fine. I think and is your proposal then that we would come back at the next one with the conditions and vote on it after
After speaking with the
Because there was
transportation.
nobody that spoke in opposition to it, it's not like,
Yeah, I think there's two pathways. You can write a condition of approval as Kelly had recommended. Or if the council is more favorable of actually having a discussion with the transportation consultant first, is to bring back findings on the next meeting for those to be adopted.
It would solve it to say not to give certificate of occupancy until the signal's complete.
Well, my concern with that is he has several $1 million into the project just sitting there.
Yeah.
I think I would feel more comfortable if you knew up front.
Yeah.
Before we did some kind of a,
Timeline at least.
see, something on that. Because there are circumstances that could hold this up. I mean, we could be delayed on signal poles. There's a multitude of things that could happen. It's just not something that we asked them to look at in the transportation impact analysis. I mean, we assumed that this project would already be done and built, and technically it's supposed to be, but our hands have been fairly tied.
So Lori, if I understood you, you're asking for approval with the understanding that there would be a condition of approval to follow? Or are you just saying, let's table it for now?
There's different ways to conclude the meeting, and my recommendation would be close the public hearing and then readdress this as the commission discussion at your next meeting.
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
So there'd be no more testimony or submission of evidence, but you would be presented with potentially proposed conditions of approval to vote out at the next commission meeting if somebody makes a motion to approve the subdivision.
Okay. Okay. So because we reopened the public testimony portion, is there anybody else who wishes to add some input to this? Seeing none, then we will close the public testimony portion and deliberate. So do you want to summarize the proposal and the next step?
So the proposal would be to conclude any further discussion on other aspects of the project tonight, and identify whether the conditions as written tonight for the rest of the remaining project are acceptable. And then we would continue, or we would leave the record. Nope.
No.
You follow.
So my understanding is we're going to close the public hearing portion of the hearing.
Which I think we already did.
Yeah, and I mean, and I don't think we need to leave the record open. I think that all we need to do is not vote on a final approval until there's further discussion just among the commission as to whether a condition of approval is warranted after further discussions between staff and the developer.
So
At the next-
motion would be to continue this agenda item to the next planning commission meeting.
For final
for
decision only.
Planning commission
Okay.
decision.
And then before we close this, if any other concerns that you have as far as the application. So that issue we'd set aside until next month or next time we're together. Is there any other issue on this application or questions that you have? Are you okay? Well, I guess I would propose that my concern is on the south side of the property, the side obscuring against Airport Road. Does anybody else have a concern with that?
I do. There are two houses across the street from that parking lot, that are right behind that grocery store. And I agree with you that that would be annoying to have headlights in your window.
Yeah.
So if I may.
Sure.
We have a condition that says a landscape plan shall be submitted prior to issuance. It specifically identifies high screen landscaping shall be applied to the western boundary line. I'm not quite sure how high screen landscaping would work for that area as it's within the front setback. High screen landscaping equals a large hedge that cuts everything off. We can take it as a planning commission direction and leave the condition as it's written, and staff will know and identify that needs to be addressed. There's also an additional condition in here that says exterior lighting on the property shall be oriented away from neighboring properties and meet the lighting standards in chapter 16.19. And that chapter speaks directly to how lighting shouldn't be intrusive onto neighboring properties. And so between that condition and the existing landscape condition, we can probably make sure that the landscape plan addresses having some sort of a hedge or a berm or something like that along the parking lots to address the lighting. So we can leave the conditions as is, or you can make a specific requirement that something is provided there, but I think it might be addressed.
I'm personally fine with the landscaping element. Does that satisfy?
The
Yeah.
house across the street is owned by the same person, so. I guess
Currently,
Currently.
Yeah, currently.
So, yeah.
okay. So would that satisfy everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
have one more, with the traffic impact, when we look at that and we go back and ask Kittleson, it's gonna be, what's the level of service of this intersection? It's not gonna be a, no, you can't do this. So it may come back as a level of service of E, which is horrendous, but it's not gonna be a, oh, you can't do this. So there may be some mitigation efforts that they might recommend. So just keep that in mind when we.
Okay.
go back. But I will get a hold of them and get you something.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so are there any other concerns or any other questions for staff about the proposal? So then do we need to vote on continuing?
Yeah, somebody would need to make a motion to continue this to the next regularly scheduled meeting with the record remaining closed.
Okay,
Make a motion for continuance of this hearing on annexation A 2301 until our next meeting, and keeping the public record closed.
It would be AR 23-02.
Oh, AR, yes, AR, yes, excuse me, correction, AR-2302.
okay, and there's a second. Only question I have, just for my knowledge, timeline's okay?
Yes, very much. so.
Okay. All right, any further questions? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed, or I mean, those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And just remember that all ex parte or ex parte contacts remain relevant from here until you make your final decision. So please don't do anything outside of this hearing other than what you've heard in this hearing and the evidence and that kind of stuff. So.
Okay. All right. Commission business.
I have a couple of updates. Hey, we're gonna have a meeting in May. It'll be this item, and then we also have another item for a conditional use permit, I believe. So we'll have two items on the agenda. As a reminder, we're in this room again 1 week from today for a 5 p.m. work session for our economic opportunity analysis presentation. 5 p.m., not 6, 5 p.m., not 6. Next Wednesday here at the travel station. I can send out another email reminder as well. That is a work session that's open to the public, so everybody's encouraged to come along and listen to what we've come up with over the last year. We are also in the process. We have one vacant spot on the Planning Commission as it sits right now, and we're going through the annual application period, which closes on April 28th. We currently have 3 applications. If there's anybody that's interested, you're encouraged to apply as well. In speaking to the mayor, our city manager identified that he would like to maintain our same process of the Planning Commission interview and make a recommendation to the mayor. And so I would be looking for 2 volunteers to participate in that hearing process. I see 2 already. Does anybody want to fight for it? Okay, I've got the 2. I will be in contact with Commissioner McLean and Malloy on what the next steps would be once it is scheduled. It'll be sometime early May.
Zone, or like with the opening that's open, which,
I believe it's city limits is open. I believe.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Because I'm not, and neither's Dawn.
Yeah. Yeah, and we already have somebody from the UGB. So yeah, it's city limits. And that's, I think I hit all of them.
Okay,
Okay.
so I have a question.
Okay.
And actually, this has come up several times, and it was actually in both of these hearings tonight. It talks about that both of these, Stoltz Hill and Airport, were identified as minor arterials with a 75-foot right-of-way and on-street parking. Okay, so what's the process on either one of them or any other street for that matter? It needs to be made city standard street.
So we look at that. So when you're in a built-out condition, which basically Airport Road is, if you were to make a 75-foot arterial down through there, really all you're giving up at this point is parking, on-street parking, and probably in some cases, not even on-street parking, but more of your planter strips and wider bike lanes. That can be done, but if you look at that holistically on Airport Road where that's built out, it's probably not worth it. So what ends up happening is you get the city that owns these little zigzag pieces of right-of-way that now we're responsible for maintaining because we own them, and they look garbagey and they're never going to get used. Now, where you come into, we require the 75-foot right-of-way for an arterial is on a brand new roadway. But when we're in a built-out condition, we look at it and go, well, is there any possibility? I mean, maybe 200 years down the road, but we don't even have any idea what that's going to look like. So we try to avoid having right-of-way that we don't need. It just creates more hassle at some point. And looking at Airport Road, the build-out on that, if you look at where houses are situated, yeah, maybe 100 years from now. But at that point, I think a lot's changed. So that's what we use as criteria. On brand new stuff, we get the right of way that we require.
So basically, if Stoltz Hill or Airport or any others continue to build out because of the logistics of what's already there,
Yeah.
we probably wouldn't do anything.
No, I mean, we end up with right of way that we end up having to maintain.
Okay.
And the reality with the money that we're faced with in lack of money in streets and a lack of money in utilities, it just does not make sense for us to take on additional when you can look out the road and go, this is probably never going to happen. I use Russell Drive as an example. We rebuilt that 2015, 2016. And we did not meet the minimum right-of-way requirements according to the TSP that was in place at that time, but there was no way to. Had we gone further, we would have taken out everybody's driveways, so nobody can park in their in their current driveway. So you have to get creative when you're in a built-out area. And in this case, we're not giving up any traffic movement stuff. You are giving up maybe wider bike lanes and stuff like that. But biking on Airport Road in general is probably, it's your heaviest AADT. So there's not a lot of people that do it.
So there's no traffic numbers or trigger point or anything that says, we got to fix this.
Well, you've got projects out of your TSP that then become system development charge projects that deal with capacity. And if we know that we have a capacity project, absolutely, we'll go get right away. Yeah, if there's something that says, hey, we need a right-hand turn lane here, this intersection needs a left-hand turn lane, then we're going to be definitely looking at right.
Okay.
Yeah, but in just a setting where the TSP and the pretty picture says we got to have 75 foot of right-of-way through here, in a built-out condition, it's never going to get built out in our lifetime and even probably the next generation's lifetime, just based on where houses are situated and where other configurations of buildings and stuff sit. It's just never going to happen.
Okay.
And the TSP in Ron's pretty picture, it's 5-foot sidewalks with 5-foot landscape planters, with parking on both sides, with bike lanes and with travel lanes. And so a large portion of it is aesthetic, and that is perfect for when you're doing new developments. When you're working within an existing condition, you're within the gutter to gutter is, do you have the capacity build that you need to be able to run that? And that's where you have the build out that we have now. And so you're not losing functionality, you're not losing capacity, you're just losing landscape planters.
And that's kind of what I was asking, because if you make the full 75 foot, some of those houses, you'd have to look both ways when you step out the front door.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we look at. When you, I mean, obviously, this is a bare vacant piece of property. You could require that they dedicate, it's 60 foot right now, so you could require that they dedicate the 7.5 feet if you were going to center on alignment. But reality of that, looking down the street and looking up the street, we have the capacity built in with the 3 lanes. And it's better to, you know, like at the intersections, buy right away, or if there's a development, require right away, so that we can move forward that way.
Okay.
Otherwise, we just end up with a bunch of stuff that we end up having to maintain and it never happens.
Okay, good. Well, that answers my question. Thank you. Anything else before we adjourn? Okay, we are done. Thank you. Ron said.